The Shiraz just shriveled on the vine because the heat just took over.
This summer has been one of the hottest on record, with heat waves sweeping right across the country, including in the Swan Valley.
The problem is the sun, really. It's not really the heat, it's the sun. If it's one day, the grape can survive. They don't really move too much. But this year it was 5 days in a row. Not only 5 days in a row, but the week after again, 5 days in a row. So it's about 3 times during the months we had those 40 plus degrees day, 4 or 5 days in a row. So that was really hurting, yeah.
For 30 years, Bruno de Taste has been making wines on this sliver of land in Western Australia's Swan Valley. Coming from one of the world's most famed wine regions, the Frenchman grows wines at his Little River vineyard the same way his family have for generations.
In Bordeaux, we're not allowed to irrigate, that's a rule. We put irrigation when we establish vines, and that takes about 3 years. But once it's established, we just take the irrigation off. So the root system goes to try to find the water wherever it is. And there is plenty of water in the Swan, on the bottom of the Swan Valley here. We've got a lot of underground stream going through the vineyard. So the vine doesn't have any problem. It's still quite cold and it's still plenty of moisture in the leaves.
In January, the region recorded consistently high temperatures, including 8 days over 38 degrees. In February, when grapes should have been maturing, they shriveled on the vine as the valley was hit with rolling 40-degree heat waves.
So that's the best example of what happened this year. The bunch are really well formed, they're really beautiful, but because there is not enough canopy on top of it to protect it from the sun. As soon as the sun hit the 45 degrees, that's what happened. It just shriveled and basically became resins.
The vineyard lost 7 tons of fruit, including its whole Shiraz crop.
That's about 6,000 bottles that we can produce from this vineyard. So yeah, it's a substantial loss, obviously. If you buy it from the cellar door, it's about $30 a bottle. But if you buy full cartons online, it goes down to 25. So it's a good price for Shiraz because it's good quality.
Have you done any calculations on what that means dollar-wise, what you would lose?
Well, you calculate about an average of $25 per bottle multiplied by 6,000. So that's about the amount that we will lose eventually. So yeah, that's quite a bit of that's a big amount, yeah. Everybody is suffering. Crops is way down from the year before.
Our foliage and the grapes dried very quickly with this harsh, hot heat. Our vintage was quite good in regards to its first full year of irrigation, but it suffered because it dried so quickly.
Tyler's vineyard, just down the road from Little River Wines, sits on the northern side of the Swan River. Unlike their southern neighbours, the vines are grown in sand and now rely on irrigation to keep them alive.
We were very fortunate that someone was selling part of their water allocation and took pity on us, and we spent a fortune on buying this licence.
And if you hadn't secured that licence, what would that have meant for your last year's harvest and this year's harvest?
We would have lost the vines. There is no way our vines would have survived. That groundwater's dropped, that taproot from the vine is, if that's not getting enough water, the vines will just perish.
When Danelle and her husband took over the vineyard in 2012, it was already established with drought-hardy vines.
Grenache is an old Spanish variety, loves the dry, hot heat, so it flourishes in the Swan Valley.
But even the hardy Spanish vines struggled under this year's sun.
Most of the vines are over 100-year-old vines. Up until last year, they weren't irrigated. We were worried because our canopy was becoming less and less. Therefore, the leaves were dry, getting really dry. The vines were struggling because they were full of fruit.
Tyler's vineyard only lost a fraction of its fruit, but saving what they could meant picking earlier.
Yeah, it was a really early harvest, the earliest we've ever seen it in the 27 years, but talking to a lot of generational, they've never seen it that early as well. We had to organise pickers, and of course everyone wants those pickers at the same time. So it was very challenging, a very challenging time.
While the Swan Valley saw soaring temperatures, growers in traditionally cooler climates like the Great Southern were also impacted by snap heat waves. Gingala Wines, here in the Prongerups at the foothills of the Stirling Ranges, has an average summer temperature of 25 degrees. But they lost 1/3 of their crop following 3 days of 38, 39 and 40 degree weather. And they're not alone.
I've never seen it like this in the 25, 26 years that I've been dealing with grapes from throughout the state.
James Kelly has been making wine at Harwood Estate in the Great Southern for over 20 years. On top of its own vines, Harwood buys fruit and makes wine for a handful of other vineyards in the region.
It's certainly affected our growers that supplies fruit from the northern sub-regions of the Great Southern, so Franklin River. Shiraz in particular from that region has been affected. One particular grower produced 2 tonnes in a year when he potentially could have had a 15, 20 tonne crop. These 40-degree days, they have an instant effect. Even blocks we have here, which have more exposed bunches and with a sort of westerly aspect, just in one day you go back and the green skin has gone brown and already starting to harden and shrivel. So literally 24 hours.
Since trade tariffs with China were introduced in 2020, the Australian wine supply, particularly reds, has risen. And while a poor season won't necessarily translate into a price hike at the cellar door, growers may lose out.
The buck always stops with the grower, unfortunately. They just won't get their returns after 12 months of inputs. To produce 2 tonnes, it doesn't cover the cost of harvest.
As global temperatures are predicted to continue rising in the coming years, the onus is on growers to find ways to combat the heat.
We'll have to adopt varieties that are better suited to the hot conditions and practices in the vineyard, which are already employed by some of the bigger vineyards, like spraying sun cream, for example, or sunblock, putting shade cloth out over the fruit zone. So there are a number of vineyards that are using those tools, but they may need to be employed more widely.